Welcome everybody to today's conversation that we have. My name is Dave Zapponi. I'm the CEO of Echo, and I want to welcome you all here today to another Educational Council of Homeowners community conversation on amending and restating governing documents. Echo is a statewide nonprofit association established to support HOA board members and engaged homeowners. Our mission is to foster a better quality of life in community associations through education, advocacy, and connections. For today's event, we have a few housekeeping items. These are now displayed on your screen. In addition, these slides were sent to all registered participants prior to today's webinar. Please take a moment to review our housekeeping items. The chat icon is to be used to report technical issues and to communicate directly with other participants in the webinar or with the speakers. You can place your questions in the Q&A feature. I will try to answer some of those questions during the presentation, but at the speaker's request, we are going to wait until the Q&A session to answer most of the questions. So thank you for that. Questions about specific situations are better asked of the attorney serving your association or another appropriate industry professional familiar with your specific situation. Now, let me direct your attention to your monitors where you'll find our disclaimer. None of what is said during this seminar shall be construed as specific legal or expert advice from the speakers, sponsors, or Echo. If you wish specific advice, we encourage you to contact your attorney or another suitable expert. The information we provide during this webinar is educational in nature and should not be relied upon for specific decision-making purposes. Thank you. This event, as well as all of our events, are made possible by the contributions of our generous professional service providers. Class fees today help to support the development costs of our educational program and defray some of our production expenses. Thank you for everyone who contributed today. Please join me in thanking the sponsors. Our program sponsor is Action Property Management. The Q&A sponsors for today are Associa and CID Consortium, LLC. The registration sponsor is Levy Erlinger and Company, LLP, CPAs. Now we will hear a few words from our program sponsor, Action Property Management.
Hello, board members. My name is Erica Kreutzer. I'm with Action Property Management's New Business Development Department. We are servicing homeowner associations throughout the state of California. So we manage over 300 associations spanning between Sacramento and San Diego currently. We have 6 regional offices as well as several satellite offices. Action Property Management is an accredited association management company with the CAI. We're aiming to change the negative perception of HOAs. We want you to love where you live. The success of your association doesn't come down just to the manager. It's also the team supporting that manager. With Action, that's our in-house technology team, our in-house accounting team, our community care team providing that back office support to the manager, and really creative communication that we provide to the residents, whether that's a manager video or announcements through text, voicemail, email, in the language preference of their choice. We offer management solutions for full service associations as well as self-managed communities. Self-managed communities might benefit from SNAP HOA. That's our accounting, technology, and manager hourly support. For more information, visit actionlife.com. And don't forget to mention today's program. You'll receive 1 month free off that base management fee. Enjoy the program.
And thank you to Action for being our premier sponsor today. Please support all of Echo's professional members and especially our sponsors. They make our educational programming possible at little or no cost to you. And now a bit about today's speaker. Glenn Youngling, Esquire, is a sole practitioner. He became extensively involved with community associations in the mid-1970s while still attending UC Hastings Law School. Over the past 40 years, he has focused his practice on common interest developments and HOA law. He spent many of his early years of practice in construction defect litigation, which evolved into HOA general counsel and helping boards better run their associations. Glenn has now reached a point in his career where he is winding down general counsel services and focusing on helping communities update their governing documents. He has been a speaker in more than 50 seminars and authored dozens of articles on nearly every facet of community association challenges. In addition, he is a court expert with opinions on the standards of care for directors. And Glenn is an outstanding speaker. I just want to put a little personal push in there. Glenn is a wonderful man, and I've really enjoyed getting to know him over the years. So, Glenn, why don't you go ahead and take it away? Your program.
Okay. I appreciate the kind introduction. And I can tell you that I'm still having fun. One of the fun things about being general counsel for so many years, and working with so many associations, there wasn't a week that went by where I didn't at least once say, huh, never seen that one before. And with all of that accumulated experience over time, we put more and more answers and solutions into governing documents to try and head off problems. And it's been lots of fun. And we still enjoy getting to know associations and working with associations, updating their documents. A threshold question here is when we talk about attorneys and who does this kind of thing. Obviously, I do, and the two people I work with in the firm, we've been together for more than 30 years. One does condominiums, the other does plan developments, and I do both in concert with them. But we're fortunate that we've got in Northern California here, we've got quite a few attorneys that have good years, seasoned attorneys with a lot of general counsel experience that can also do the governing documents. And one thing that you want to think about when you're out there, you find someone, you really need a firm or an individual that has done a fair number of these, both in terms of keeping things up and also just the practical aspects of knowing what goes wrong in an association and trying to draft solutions in. So don't hesitate to ask for proposals. We're all accustomed to providing proposals. Take a look at them, ask whatever follow-up questions, and then follow your gut level instinct as far as who's going to be a good work for your budget and your association. So, a couple of things. I know we can start with the first slide. If there we go, the hierarchy. There is a pecking order for documents, and at the top is always statutes. Underneath that would be the declaration or the CCNRs. The articles come below that, bylaws and rules. The declaration is really what you're looking at to get the most mileage when you're revising the documents. That's where the real effort goes in. That's the bones and the flesh, the muscle of the document, and generally that's going to be preempt any of the other documents. Articles are kind of a placeholder. There could be articles of incorporation. Most associations are incorporated. Secretary of State uses them kind of as a placeholder. Once in a while, we still see articles of association, which are for unincorporated associations, which also have to register with the Secretary of State so they can track. But it's like a placeholder. Sometimes we update articles, but the content is really bureaucratic, and there's no real substance to it. It looks nice if we update them, but sometimes it's not worth the effort. Bylaws are largely procedural. In the past, it was almost all corporations code, but over the years, the legislature's been putting more and more of those types of procedures into what's called the Davis-Sterling Act. And the Davis-Sterling Act is in the Civil Code of California, and it's where they put all the association-related laws. So you'll hear me and you'll hear others talking about the Davis-Sterling Act, and it is a place you can go. There are copies of it online. And then rules, and rules are at the bottom. The rules can't have anything that conflicts with the hierarchy documents above them, but they can flesh out detail, and they are a useful tool. Now, there's an oddity here in that if you look to the top and we've got statutes, and you look to the bottom, we've got rules. The legislature will periodically say that you must adopt a policy or a rule to address a particular subject. It's required. Why do they do that? They do it because they know that there are outdated documents out there and they're passing a law and they want the rule or policy to contain and reflect the law. And so it's a way to, in a sense, refresh the documents or provide a more reliable source. So when you get into the types of the rules that are out there, or policies, there's voting and architectural and internal dispute resolution, things like that that you'll see, and then there are laws that are often woven through there. So there's the hierarchy. When we talk about amending governing documents is sort of a blanket term for all of this, but the real thrust when you're updating your documents is going to be the declaration and the bylaws. The rules are something that come afterwards. So there's your hierarchy. And for me, my own sake, I still use a three-ring binder. I've got everything online and I can look electronically and flip through on my iPad, but I still prefer having a basic three-ring binder with tabs for the different documents. And I find that's helpful. And you might ask yourself when you update your documents, do you want something like that? Or is everybody digital? In which case you want to make sure it can be read on an iPad or a computer. All right. A word also about the statutes is that you'll find some of the statutes are permissive. That means you can follow it if it fits, but you could be more strict. Some statutes out there preempt or overrule, override what's in your documents, and you'll see language like, notwithstanding what's in your documents, this is the law. And there's the good example that comes to mind is assessments are all regulated by statute, and it says, notwithstanding what's in your documents, this is what you must do with respect to assessments. And then there are some default provisions, which if your documents don't address something, then this is what you do. And you have to be very careful about the default provisions on who takes care of what. That is a major area for us, and we'll deal with a lot of detail in the declaration. But with a lot of statutes, and this one in particular, where it says if it's common area, the association maintains, repairs, replaces. Okay, and if it's unit area or a lot, then the owner is responsible to maintain, repair, or replace, unless the documents provide otherwise. And then lastly, the default for exclusive use common area is owner maintains and association repairs and replaces. Now, that's one size fits all. And I've worked with the condominium associations small as two, an abomination in the way it was created and operates. And the largest was around 5,000 homes. One size fits all. So you don't want to be there because you can get bizarre results by applying those general standards. So the challenge is when you're getting into your declaration to spend the time on the detail so that you can tell it like you want it and not have to rely on that. Okay, so considerations, the next slide. There are documents naturally erode over time. I suspect most of you know that, or you wouldn't be spending time here today looking into this. But what are the reasons why, and how do they erode over time as far as reliability and usability? Early on, there's always declarant information that's in there. Declarant, the developer, the seller of the units initially when they were new, they put in a lot of language to handle them through the transition in the front end and also to control disputes. They will often have a couple of pages of dispute resolution. And as soon as the developer's gone, or 10 years roughly, all of those things are completely useless. They're just surplusage. You don't need them in there anymore. So it's nice to take out the developer provisions that are no longer applicable. I can also tell you that if you find the documents, the originals are too generic and you want to update them and not wait for the developer to be completely gone or more than 10 years, what we have done in the past to be a little creative, developers not going to give up any rights they have in the document, but you don't want to burden it. So perhaps they could be shifted to an exhibit that can be dropped later on, or there could be a paragraph that says, with respect to developer rights, if any, see the prior recorded document, article, whatever, and incorporated by reference. And so you can get the junk out of there, all of the language, without ending up in a legal fight with the developer who says, I've still got rights. Changes in the law. the legislature every year has 2 or 3 changes to the law, sometimes a lot big, sometimes not so big, but the changes in the law definitely erode the quality of the documents. Demographics change, the age of the population, the preferences that people have. It's different if there's a lot of little kids running around versus a much older community, and even that's cyclical. So when you try and do the documents and bring them up to speed, you want to look at the demographics of who you're working with and try and draft accordingly. Uh, the experience of your association and also others is a big factor in this. As you look back over the years and think, well, you know, what did we learn about our roofing, or what did we learn about drainage, or what did we learn about whatever? And then there are also the experience of others. Now, you may not know a lot about that. The managers probably do, and your attorney will. And I will tell you that the experience of others from many, many associations is when we get into the area of risk management after the fires and big casualty events. We learned a lot from the experience of those associations going through them, and so we bring that experience over and put them into your documents. Even though you may not look, you may look at the damage and destruction, for example, and say, "Well, I don't know anything about that." You hopefully you never will have to. And then every once in a while, you'll find yourself uh, just thinking there ought to be a better way. And then lastly, if you never look at your documents because they're no damn good anyway, and they're not giving you answers, well, I'll tell you, if that's the case, then it's a time bomb ticking, and they can be used against you. So all of that means maybe time to bring it up to speed. Date wise, like I said, original documents might be 5 to 10 years where you want to get the generic out and the developer to the declarant. I think 10 years is probably a good average to take a look. If your documents are 10 or more years old, you should look at them and at least ask the questions. Is it time to renew? And more current documents, in the sense that if it's 10 years old now, odds are that it's not too bad from 10 years ago, and maybe you don't need to update. But 10 years is a good time to look. Consider also mini amendments, at least I call mini amendments. If something does come up and you say, well, that's really the only thing I'm interested in amending, then think about just a specific narrow mini amendment, a tack-on amendment, if you will, that could be passed. Some statutes do require updating. They mandate that. Um, so, overall, take a look. Statutory compliance, big area, assignment of responsibilities, who maintains, repairs, and replaces what, tipping that balance between owners and association. Enforcement tools and options. That's something that's undervalued by a lot of people who draft the documents, but after you live with problems for a while, you realize you really want to be able to lay that out. I believe in adding lots of enforcement options, and it's not that it's draconian. I just like to have a lot of tools in the box so we can escalate in the smallest amount possible. And so enforcement is something that you should be looking at and apply your past experience and say, how do we handle this? So that's another reason for updating. And then the big one, which I mentioned a little bit, was risk management. The risk management to me is insurance, casualty damages, and being proactive on some components. Now, what does that mean? Insurance, basically, we want the association master policy. Most still have that, and owners' individual policies, often called an HO6. Those things fit together. With damage and destruction, we want to make sure that article in the CCNRs that you hope you never have to look at will give you a roadmap for things to come. I will tell you that I still see documents that say within 90 days of the casualty, the board shall obtain 3 bids and select the bidder and then proceed to repair. Now, anybody that's been through a casualty, even a kitchen fire, knows you're going to have to hire an architect or an engineer to do drawings to get the permit. And by the time you finish with all of that, you might be 6 months down the line. And as far as bids go, it's a floating scope because it's a casualty loss, and they find out new things along the way. And the insurance company says, "Hey, we'll keep the claim file open," but it's not biddable in a sense because the scope is only maybe 50 or 60% 90% known. So when I look at those kinds of documents and see those kinds of restrictions that are going to burden a board exactly when you're looking for a roadmap or to make things easier, then you should be changing that. And I did on the standard of care issue, unfortunately, get involved with one situation where an owner sued the board that was overseeing the fire damage repair caused by the owner, by the way, um, and suing the board saying that you failed to comply with the governing documents in the way you went about the repair, and therefore you don't get the statutory protections of a volunteer director, the immunity provisions that are in the law. Terrible place to be. And it was because they hadn't updated their documents and they were in violation of their documents, even though they went about it in a business-like way in cooperation with the insurance company. It was not a good place to be. Anyway, okay. And risk components, those are for example, washing machine hoses or the valves for your fixtures behind the toilet or under the sink. There are a variety of different risk components where the association may want to be more proactive. Water heaters. I first got onto my radar when I had an association and there were 100 condominiums. And in one year and they were all relatively new. At year 6 or 7, the water heaters started to fail. And when they had 5 or 6 of them fail in a row, they knew that all the others were likely to fail. And the insurance claims were astronomical. And they wanted to be proactive to tell people, hey, you can't wait until it fails. You've got to check it. And we want you to do something about it because otherwise we're going to lose our insurance. And so we started looking at risk components as a separate section where the association, if it's warranted, can be a little more proactive in trying to get owners to take care of things. All right. So, couple of things about attorneys and what can you do when you've decided, okay, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna embark on that process. You've approached several law firms. You've asked for the proposals. What is it that you can expect? Attorneys have different approaches to this. Some attorneys have what they call a template version, and they'll pull that template off the shelf, and then they will do all of their research into the nuances of your construction and your preferences, things like that. They'll get into all of that, and they'll plug all of that into their template. The template's well organized, it's got all the terms of art in there, and that's their preference in how they handle it. For bylaws, I do that as well. The bylaws get outdated so quickly, and there's no real personality to the bylaws. So that makes a lot of sense there. My own preference is a little more time consuming, is that what we like to do is redlining. And that way we get it there maybe 90%, 95% of the way there in the first draft, but the developers can look at it and see what's changed and have a comfort level with that. And just as importantly, owners can look at it if, when it comes further down the line, and they can have a comfort level that nobody's trying to pull a fast one. But whether it's a template approach or a red line approach, ask about what the attorney's preference is and see what you think about that. Now, economics, there's nothing inexpensive about governing documents, and a good set requires a lot of time going into it. And I think as we proceed today, you're going to get more and more of why that takes a while. But many people, I think probably most that specialize in community associations, will offer a flat fee on the front end, and then there's variable after that. Flat fee is a certain scope of work, and then hourly for whatever else. Now, you can expect, and this is not just the law, you can expect at the low end, somebody gives you a very low flat fee with a very low scope of work. Or somebody at the other end of the spectrum will give you a very high flat fee, but it's all inclusive. And sometimes the low end guy ends up being more expensive than the high end guy. And then there are people that are in the middle. So, I can't tell you exactly what to expect. If somebody was to say, hey, just throw a number at me for budgeting purposes, I would say budget $10,000. It could be more. It's possible it could be less, but it's probably going to be less, not less by the time you get through. So, we're in that range of $10,000. And like I said, it could be more. Time is money. When you get past the flat fee and you start talking to attorneys, it gets expensive very quickly. So make sure that the focus is on that first draft within the flat fee, getting as much as you possibly can before you start talking, because it gets very expensive very quickly. Okay, and what can you do to help the attorney once you've selected them? The thing that I recommend against is, and my heart just sinks when somebody goes, "Oh, we've had a committee working on it. We have our first draft. Can you start with that?" And you can critique that. And they're thinking that it's going to save the attorney a lot of time, and it actually does not. It makes it more difficult and it's more time consuming. The best thing in my experience is that you can come up with what I'll call a hit list, and that is the things that have bothered you. It's a wish list. It's a list of things that where you looked in the documents and there was no answer. Coming up with the problems or the challenges and providing the list, not the answers or what you think is the answer to the problem, but the problems themselves. And experienced, seasoned counsel can then make sure that all of the things on that list are integrated into the document, and they'll do it in ways that you wouldn't even see or imagine how things fit together. So assistants of counsel, don't assume they will know everything. At the very front end, you should be providing, I think, a list of all the considerations and concerns that you have to help. And it is very helpful when we get that. Now, also, you'll find that counsel should be looking at your documents, your circumstances, the reserve study, insurance claims. I personally will look at as many years of minutes as an association will provide. And once I had 18 years worth of minutes provided electronically. And that, the thing is, after you look at enough of them, you can fly through pretty quickly. But on any particular set of minutes, there'll be two or three things that may jump out, that the plumber was called again for some reason, or that there's another roof leak, or there are tree roots, or things like that. Those things pop up in the minutes, and then you forget by the time you get around to updating the documents. Those may be from 3, 4 years ago, might be different directors involved, but by skimming through the minutes, you can come up with your own list, or the attorney will be doing it and taking a look to see what things there should be on the overall hit list. It's like a lot of construction projects. The real key is in the preparation before you actually start. The more that's understood about the history of the place and the preferences and the potential problems that have been there, the better the document's going to be when you start it. So it's worth doing homework. And all right. So next slide here. Um, Hidden tools. Um, when you get into the documents, the bylaws to an extent, but especially with the CCNRs, there are some things that you should understand on how to use them. They're really not meant to be read page one, line one, and then all the way through. Your eyes will roll back and you'll fall asleep if you're lucky. If you try and get a sense for what am I going to do with this problem or this challenge, and I'll start on page one. What you need to do, size the thing up and realize that there should be a good table of contents. If there's not, make one. You want the table of contents because the information is chunked in a certain way, and certain of the articles have to work together back and forth. So you want to be able to get in and out of those. So the table of contents is a really important place. We've tried indexes in the past, and it just ends up there's so many terms that are referred to. They're virtually worthless. And I'm trying to recall if I've ever seen a set of CCNRs with a real live index in the back, and I can't recall seeing one in all my decades. But the table of contents, yes, that's a good thing to have. Be familiar with it and how the information is grouped. Also, if you look at the front of the CCNRs, you'll find defined terms. Defined terms, there may be 10, there may be 18 or 20, some of them may be outdated, but defined terms are an opportunity. And when we do our documents, what we do is we define the key terms, the ones that are going to be most useful, that have to have a precise definition behind that'll be helpful. And then we bold those terms, capital and bolded. So a defined term anywhere in the documents jumps off the page because it's bold with a capital letter. That's a key when you're looking at the document later on about who takes care of what. When you see a defined term there, go back and look at the definition. If you're in a condominium and you have a unit, the unit definition may include 30 different features of the unit. So that's important when you see reference to unit later on. So defined terms, big way to use it. Also, when you're taking a look at the CCNRs and sizing things up, understand that there are general rules and there are exceptions. That's true with respect to the Davis-Sterling Act. It's also true in these documents, general rule and exceptions. I often see people, they'll dive in and they'll find just one fragment and they'll say, yeah, this applies to me. And they throw that out there and say, yeah, this is the answer from the CCNRs. And in fact, they're extrapolating from one exception to a different subject, and they haven't got the overview look of what's going on and how the general rule and exceptions interplay back and forth. So understand that that's often there. Balancing the CCNRs versus rules and policies. We get the question, well, how much should be in the CCNRs? And there are fundamental basics. How much should be in rules and policies? Well, the rules and policies are much easier. The board can amend those 28-day notice and a draft out to the members. But one big difference between the two, and we walk the line when we're doing CCNRs, is that the CCNRs are presumptively valid. If somebody wants to challenge a CCNR provision, they have the burden of showing that it's illegal, and it's a tough burden because courts don't like dealing with these things. The flip side is with rules, the burden is on the association to show that the rule is reasonable. And that doesn't seem like a lot when nothing's wrong, but when you're going into an argument, who has the high ground is can be significant. And so we tend to in the CCNRs, we tend to provide some detail in there. Parking in vehicles would be one good example where we put more detail than we might otherwise. Then and other people would just leave that into the rules, but we want it in there because in some places parking in vehicles is an issue, so we want to beef that up. Some people will put more of the pet provisions in there, things like that. So ask yourself, where do we find the right balance? Is it worth putting in here? Also, enforcement options. I mentioned a little bit how my philosophy is as many tools as possible because I want to escalate in the smallest increment possible. And you need to understand that the enforcement tools are sort of hidden in a separate place where you'll find a potential violation. You'll get all the way through. Before you embark on anything, you should take a look at the enforcement options. I still see documents that say, that the association can conduct a violation hearing and can even issue a fine. And then when you go look in the assessment section, it'll be an individual assessment or a reimbursement assessment, something like that. In the assessment section, it'll say that fines are not collectible by lien. Well, that means you got to sue to collect the fine. Well, what kind of leverage is that? So understand where your options lie as you go in and you size the thing up in the table of contents and the general rules, exceptions, and the enforcement options, all of that sort of thing. Okay. And one thing that you might try, you can do it with your existing documents, do it certainly with the draft when you get the draft from your counsel, is think of it as an open book test. Take a scenario, a problem from the past, and sit down and see if you can find the answers. I had a director, it was really interesting. It took them about 8 to 10 months from the first time the directors got the documents and to the time that they finally endorsed the last version. They had a lot of other things going on. But the president of the association said during that whole time, every time there was an issue, he went to the draft documents knowing that didn't apply because they weren't passed yet, but he consistently found answers in the draft documents that weren't in his existing documents. And he came out of that process and like an open book test, and he was enormously impressed. But he also learned how to use all the tools and use the documents. So by the time they were voting on them, he was as good as anybody in explaining how they work and why they're a good value to the community. Okay. And as a by the way, I thought enforcement tools that looks kind of draconian sitting on the table, but you see the GovDoc binder sitting there. That's what you should be using, not the other things. The other things don't really exist in reality, but a lot of the artificial intelligence image generators don't want to do weapons, so you get the bizarre things sitting there. Okay, so next slide. Who's responsible for what? Um, we've touched on this already, but and there is a starting point is different for a condominium versus a planned development. And so in a condominium, the starting point is the association is responsible for everything except the unit. General rule, the starting point is all of that. And what's a unit? A unit is a cube of air surrounded by finishes. It includes fixtures and the finishes themselves, everything on the inside of that cube, if you will. And then beyond that is common area. So by default, that goes to condominium. unless it's assigned to the owner. And a plan development, it's the other way around. The plan development on a lot, the owner is responsible for 100% of what's on the lot, maintain, repair, replace, except those things delegated to the association. So the starting point is an important thing to understand what kind of beast that we're dealing with for starters. The defaults, for those who would want to look it up, it's in Civil Code Section 4775. It's pretty generic, and it's the legislature with a very generic way as to who takes care of what. Association common area, owner, individual lot or unit, and then owner maintains, and association repairs and replaces if it's exclusive use common area. So those are sometimes a little too simplistic. I tend to often look at these things and say, well, who's responsible for what and how do we want to set that up? Well, there's ownership, control, and duty to pay. And guess what? I don't care about ownership. Doesn't make any difference to me whether it's a plan development or a condominium. I really don't care. I care who controls the work, who has the responsibility, and who pays for it. And sometimes it's not as simple as you might think. We've had incidents where several sewer laterals join with each other before they go out into the street with the main lateral out there. And the association says, I don't want to do sewer laterals. It's a planned development. I don't want to do sewer laterals, but somebody's got to control it because it goes under landscape and paths and then goes out to the street. And in a situation like that, the board may say, well, how about we control the work as an association and levy a reimbursement assessment on the people benefited by the work? So you can control the hardscape work and that sort of thing. So sometimes that gets mixed and matched. Considerations to think of. When we're looking at a component, and this is especially true for condominiums, but also to an extent, plan developments, whenever we look at, it's the doorbell, it's the light fixture, it's the front door, the garage door, it's all of the features that are around, even on the inside. Should the association be taking care of it, or is it the owner that should be taking care of it? And we know the default that Davis Sterling provides, which really doesn't help for the gray areas in between. So things that we look at are in considering how we tip the balance of responsibility. We want to look at aesthetics. Is it important to the community overall? We definitely want to consider life safety. If it's life safety, that weighs heavily for the association getting more involved with it. Economies of scale, and especially if it's cyclical and the work can get done. Economies of scales, for example, roofing. You're going to do all the roofing at once or in the same rough period of time. Painting, those are big jobs. But are there economies of scale that make sense? Access is a huge one. If access is unique to each individual and it's a problem, you got to get the manager involved and coordinate with the contractor, and then it gets more expensive if access is an issue. Often, if it's just interior, it's more efficient for an owner to pay for their own and not have to contribute to everybody else when the problem comes up. So access is thought about. Different levels of use and abuse. The more things wear out individually because some people use or abuse them, the more it's likely you should perhaps be putting it on the individual owner, because not everybody's going to benefit the same amount or at the same time. Past practices. You can change practices in your documents, and many associations say, well, we've done it every which way in the past. How can we change now? And owners love to stand up and say, that's not what we did before. You can't change that. And in fact, the Davis Sterling and the courts have said, yes, if you live in an association with governing documents, part of what you buy into is the possibility the community will change certain standards or practices. So past practices are important to understand, but it's not, it won't shackle you if you think that you've got to change something. Insurance. Who's responsible for what? That helps when you're looking at certain things, just to know, well, that would be a claim on then the owner's insurance. Well, that makes more sense maybe for the owner to take care of this. But insurance generally and um, duty to maintain, repair, replace is not, they overlap, but it is not a good fit completely. They are two different standards. We'll get into that a little bit later. And we talked about drafting the hit list. Come up with your own hit list. There'll be plenty of items on it. Okay. I do suggest one thing that you ought to be looking at in particular when you consider updating your documents, regardless of the nature of your association. Take a look at the utility lines. Utility lines over time, especially with older associations, we run into buildings or buildings now where water lines have to be rerouted because they are failing inside the walls just through age, you get a couple of leaks and you realize, uh-oh, we've got to replace the lines. Sewer lines are a big one now, and a lot of the sewer districts require cameras in those lines and updating the lines. So who's responsible for what? Take a look and see your utility lines. The documents should be very clear. Not that they are necessarily now, but they should be as to water, gas, electric, and sewer. You want to make sure that all of those things get addressed. And when you're talking about sewer, you're also talking about tree roots. Make sure you address whose tree roots they are and how you go about addressing sewer lines that where it's really a root problem more than a sewer problem. Okay, so on the next slide, common problems that are out there, just some examples. I'll tell you the circuit breaker panels. It's a little bit of an inartful image of a circuit breaker panel, but those are huge right now. And lots of planned developments we've seen over time. When people buy in, they want the circuit breaker replaced. There are old ones out there that will fail. They will allow more electricity to go through, things heat up, they can start fires. Old circuit breaker panels are a significant problem. And even if you're not aware of it or they're hidden in people's closets or in their laundry room, those old circuit breakers are having to be addressed one way or the other. In condominiums, absolutely. But the question is, how do you go about that? And the answer is, the answer to that should be in your documents. You should be thinking who's responsible for circuit breaker panels. Generally, in a plan development, it's going to be the owner, unless there's something really odd in the documents. But even if it's a plan development and the owner's responsible, here's the kicker. The insurance company comes along and says, this is for the master policy. Oh, you have all of these old panels. We're going to non-renew you unless you replace all the panels. Whoa. In a condominium, they can do the same thing, but usually the association has more leverage in a condominium circumstance. But even so, it may be part of the unit itself. So you got to ask yourself, do these documents that we're drafting provide the tools so that we can require people to make these changes, or can we control the changes and then levy a reimbursement assessment for those people that need it? Pets, there's no ending to the potential for pet problems. Dog people, cat people. I liked this particular sign because it says, "Please do not empty your dog here." And I just thought, whoever had that sign originally has a sense of humor, and I liked that so much better than every other pet sign I've ever seen out there. But some people think it's important enough to get pets into the CCNRs because it's that big a deal. Other people are comfortable leaving it in the policy. I actually split down the middle on pets. I like to say that the board can adopt rules or policies related to pets, and those rules may include, for example, and one of the things that I put in is dog breeds. Now, I will confess, I'm a dog person. I like dogs. I happen to think that there really are no bad dogs, just bad owners. Um, but there are problems potentially with some animals that are enormously aggressive. And you think, well, does that mean, are we going to be in a position where we're going to stop somebody from having a particular type of dog, a Rottweiler or a Doberman Pinscher or a pit bull or whatever, or do we really want all of that? And I think that for some associations, it may be important enough. If you have common hallways, if you have elevators, you may have a lot more focus on the types of animals. But one of the things that you might not ever realize when you get into it is that homeowner policies will not cover certain breeds. There are lists that are restricted, and you can go online and you can find some of those lists. And if your master policy won't cover pet liability, because it's one of those breeds. Well, now you've got a problem. And as an owner, you should know, are you insured? If is your pet on the list? So the subject of pets overlaps into insurance and liability. At any rate, so we hedge the bet there. We talk about the specifics of that the board may put into the rules. And if you don't need them, don't bother. But if you have a problem, at least you've got a little better foundation for putting that in. Acoustics, oh, what a popular subject, and God, I hate it. The uh, the people here walking around with cinder blocks taped to their shoes. There's actual YouTube of people actually doing that. It's pretty funny out there. But in any case, acoustics, especially in older places where you have over under. It's a never-ending problem, and the older they are, the more you'll find more and more people have put in hard surface flooring, and then there's a change in occupancy. Then the person down below starts complaining about the new noises up above, and when you tackle it, you may find if it's an older association that a lot of people have done it. Can you change status quo? Yes, you can. You can require approvals, but if you're addressing acoustics, there's two parts to it. There's proactive, which says all must be carpeted except bathrooms, kitchen, and a little bit in the entryway. Proactive is, yep, that's what you got to have. Reactive is, we're going to moderate what you can do, and we may need approvals. But reactive is when there's a problem, we'll deal with that particular problem one at a time. And often the association is going to want to say, why don't you two neighbors go to mediation on it? We don't want to get in the middle. Years back, I had an incident where there was a woman who was very sincere and complaining bitterly about the people upstairs. And the directors had the foresight to, they just said, well, let's go listen. And everybody in the meeting got up, left the rec room, went over, stood down below while other directors went upstairs and made normal kinds of noises. Then they went the other way and they all came back and they said, we live with those noises all the time. And it doesn't bother us. I don't know why she's complaining. The reason she was complaining is because she hated her neighbor. And the noise was a reminder. Every time she heard something, she was thinking, I hate my neighbor. Other people were there when they hear a subtle noise, it's background white noise, or they think, I like my community. And so if you see this as two personalities, and the association doesn't want to get in the middle of something that's that subjective, you want the tools in the documents to send these people off to mediation and potentially have consequences if either party refuses to do that. If it's a requirement in the CCNRs, you can require them to try it in good faith. And if they refuse, then you may be heading off to a hearing and you've already got your first violation, which is a failure to use the ADR as required by the CCNRs. So acoustics is another good a good subject. Okay. One thing about hard surface floors that I have to bring up, and it's the exception. There are people out there who want hard surface floors, and they'll do almost anything to get them. There may be some legitimate reasons as well, but what I've heard is they go to the allergy doctor. Doctor writes a note that says this is a necessary medical accommodation because of their allergies, and it's a health accommodation. And if you don't let them do that, then you're violating the reasonable accommodation for a medical condition, and that's not a great place to be. The people that will manipulate the law on this think that they can get away with it. Okay, fine. If they're going to come up with that doctor's note and you're going to permit the surface flooring, require an agreement to get recorded into title that says when there's no medical necessity that it will be overlaid with carpet or removed. You got to think ahead on these things, because when they turn around and sell, the next person coming in isn't going to have that doctor note, and the person downstairs may still have the problem of the additional noise. So even on something like this, if you're yielding for a medical accommodation, think through how are you going to enforce, and over time, what tools do we have then when the next owner comes in? All right. So enforcement example, next slide. Just I wanted you to know, and I wanted to give you a little bit of a sense for how different sections may fit together. Um, yeah, a good scenario when you sit down and you've got your table of contents and you're going to try and solve it like an open book test. Tenant with junker cars, an aggressive dog, unsavory visitors at all hours, loud music, front yard's in bad shape. The owner of the place is stationed somewhere in the Far East, and the brother in New York is got the power of attorney, and they won't respond to you. And what are you going to do? So you might look at the table of contents and start sketching out some notes. First of all, we know the owner is responsible for the tenant. We're going to focus 90% on the owner and 10% on the tenant in our efforts. We have pets and guidance that's in there. We have a nuisance section on, nuisance may be large section or a small section, but it's usually something that's offensive. Vehicles and parking, and then we get to the hearing and statement of decision. The hearing and statement of decision, it's a process. It's notice, the hearing itself, and the written statement of decision with the consequences in it. And I want you to know how powerful that process can be. And it's blessed by the Davis-Sterling Act. Years back, I had an association. They were condominiums, but they were a townhouse row. There were five townhouses in the row. And one from the end, the kids started a fire. They were teenagers with candles and incense and whatnot. They started a fire that got rip roared and took out three of the condominiums. The problem that the association had, in addition to rebuilding, was that they had insurance for code upgrade, the things that they were older buildings, and the code upgrade was meant to, when you build it back, it's got to be to the current code, and sometimes that's far more expensive with higher standards. And they had the category, but they had a $10,000 cap on it. And they were $100,000 short on the code upgrades. So what did the association do? We had a notice, conducted a hearing, there was a statement of decision, there was litigation, and the thing settled in the litigation. This is the old days. The judge invited the insurance attorney or the owner attorney, who was paid for it by the insurance company, and me to the back room, looks at the guy and he says, I've looked at the documents, the underlying documents, and the responsibility and the liability, and I've looked at the whole hearing process, and the statement of decision has the dollar amount. What are you doing? You're going to lose. You realize you're going to lose. And what we had done is we crossed the T's and dotted the I's at every step along the way. And when the judge looked at the paperwork, there was a feeling of familiarity that that's how they do bench trials, and all of the due process was in there, including the final decision looked like something a judge might write. When you write that decision and the findings, don't think that the owner on the other end of it's going to be all that impressed, but a mediator or a judge might be. So I put a lot more emphasis on the integrity of the hearing and the statement of decision and the consequences. Just want you to know that's an important section. We talked about reimbursement assessments. Um, they're called different things in different documents, but that's very common. That could be out-of-pocket costs for the manager related to it. It could be out-of-pocket costs for counsel, or it could be cost of repair. And sometimes we mix and match that you can do a lien for out-of-pocket costs, but you can't do a lien for a fine, for example. And some liens, you might not want to do a non-judicial foreclosure approach, but you might want to do a lien to keep the option open for a judicial foreclosure. So these are things that you want to look through and make sure that you've got the variety of tools. Notice of violation on title, especially if it's architectural. There's actually a case that says you can't do that. And then why is it sitting here at 11.7? The answer is that if the association records, I'll call it a passive lien, and there's any level of reimbursement assessment in there, or perhaps a fine, then you can tell that story in the lien, and it ends up in title. When the person goes to refinance or sell, that will pop back up, and then you'll have your leverage to resolve the problem if it could wait that long. So it's just sort of a backdoor trick to get that on the record. Incidentally, you can Davis-Sterling Act also says when the association is providing documents to a seller to hand along to the buyer, that document can include any actual or alleged problem violations related to the building. The thing there is you got to remember to put it in. Okay, so next slide. I wanted to give you a sense for when I look through, these are all examples that I've pulled out of sets of minutes when I've gone back. First one is, excuse me, plan developments, architectural agreements, railings. If you have outdoor railings, who's responsible? I mean, we all know about that balconies are now getting focus, especially in condominiums. But what we find in older buildings is the gap in the railings, the vertical gap is wider than it's supposed to be, and who's responsible to replace that when the insurance company comes around and says you should take care of that. Or if somebody's got small pets or children, maybe there needs to be something done with the railing or upgraded. These are things that you should be thinking about with your architectural style and who's responsible for what. Because if your documents simply say the association maintains the balconies and railings, and you're thinking that's just a paint job, it may be something else. Land developments, once you get down to termites, especially contractor inspection reports, you want the ability to ask for those and see them. Cable service contracts, catastrophic damage, Old associations will once in a while want to change the paint color, different palette. Well, in a planned development, the owner owns it. What happens when they say, no, you can't change the color of my place? Well, we're responsible to paint. Well, changing color isn't what you can do. I don't like that new color. So you can actually put it into the documents that the association has the aesthetic control over the outside. So you can run down this, excuse me, run down this list later. There's lots of good examples on this. And I would expect that for most of you, if you get 10 years worth of minutes, you're going to find your own list very similar to this and more. So let's flip next to the condominiums. The list is even more important because as to who's going to take care of what in the documents. And so in that preparation, before even starting the draft, the update of the documents, we go through and we look at this list. And this comes from within their documents. It comes from the insurance claims. It comes from the minutes and the reserve study. We pull all of these things together, and every once in a while we get a wild one, which is fire sprinkler heads. We'll find that there was a kitchen fire at one point along the way, and that particular unit or building had to have a sprinkler system installed, and nobody else even has one. Who's responsible for that system? And since nobody else has one, or it's not in all of the buildings, that's a good question to ask. Well, maybe because it's life safety, the association should control and levy a reimbursement assessment on those people that have it. Just a thought. Anyway, so you can see moisture in the crawl spaces. That's also true for planned developments. Neighbor to neighbor noise complaints, defective alterations, architectural alterations, especially in a condominium. People do kitchens and bathrooms, and you'll be surprised at the lack of integrity to the waterproofing behind things, whether it's the plumbing or the shower or the tub. And then that owner sells, a new owner comes in and says, I'm not responsible for that slow leak and the decay. That's common area. That's in the wall. And I didn't do that work. So now you have to repair it. You want in your CCNRs that each owner is responsible for alterations by the predecessor? I think probably. So think about that and put it on your hit list. Sewer backups and interior damage. There are all kinds of things. So take a look at that list if you're planned development or a condominium, and you could start with that list before you hand your hit list to the attorney. And I think that you'll be off to a good start. Okay, risk management. The next slide. Boy, it was tough getting a graphic with a lightning bolt, a fire, and a flood all at the same time. But there we go. And we've learned a lot. First of all, in the insurance pieces of the puzzle that we put together, we always start with risk management, looking at insurance, the master policy and the individual policies, and perhaps even the renter policies to make sure that those things dovetail. We urge and push very hard. Owners need to have their own policies. I'm not a huge fan of the insurance industry overall, but I can tell you, bang for the buck on an individual policy is typically pretty good. And it's called an HO6 in the industry. And even if it's a planned development, they'll often say, well, it's a condominium type policy. Don't let that phase you. It's an individual owner policy. It's more important than ever. And one of the reasons is because the size of the deductibles. I have several association clients I've worked with that have $50,000 deductibles. Well, if you don't have owner insurance to pick up the difference between the HO6 and the master policy deductible, you might be looking at a $9,000 hole, and you're going to be looking at the owner saying, this is your problem. Because you started, or the point of origin was in your home. So you really want to make sure that it's a requirement, that it's in the documents. Once in a while, we do get the zealots that say, well, we need to stay on top of this. Everybody needs to tell the association who their carrier is, and we're going to maintain a master list. And managers all go, uh-oh. This is one of those areas where I say it's required, and you must provide evidence upon request. And if you want to request, high rises in particular often will do that. Then do it every 3 years, evidence of insurance. When the reserve study comes up, just routinely ask for a copy or evidence of insurance. It also gets to be important in areas of exclusion from insurance policies. You'll find asbestos or mold or two exclusions. You want to be clear on risk management, who's responsible for those types of things. We also, with the difficulty in getting insurance, The options are out there more than ever. In the old days, it was always full replacement cost. And that was nice because when there was a claim, it was basically the insurance is going to pay A to Z to fix the thing and restore it to the way it was. Life was good. Now, with the cost of insurance and the difficulty of getting coverage for some things, we're looking for fallbacks and to put more of the risk onto the individual owner and less on the master policy. So hopefully we can preserve the master policy and the reasonableness of the cost, availability and reasonableness of the cost. Um, so now we get into things like, well, the restoration will be to builder grade. Builder grade is not any of the upgrades that have done along the way. It's not the fancy stuff, but it's easier to insure. And builder grade is uh, insurance adjusters and contractors have a pretty good understanding of that. There's a little bit of wiggle room around it, but more and more now they're going with builder grade on the master policy. Well, how does that work if there's a loss? What typically would happen then is that the association will pay over to the owner the insurance dollar amount for builder grade, and then the owner on their insurance can do whatever upgrades they want or even decide to remodel at that point. And the insurance and the association backs out and gives them builder grade dollars, and they then can restore it with their own insurance or on their own nickel. We also see bare walls, or walls in different expressions, but the whole idea is just the shell is going to get covered, the shell of the building, but none of the interior finishes, fixtures, cabinets, toilets, heaters, all of those things. Nope, not covered in the master policy if it's a bare walls policy, and it's carriers like it. And some associations are going for it. It's another place to draw the line. So when you're looking at insurance, know that there are these kinds of options out there. Do require owner insurance. The word subrogation comes up, and I hate to get all lawyerly on you because this is a term that most people are not familiar with, but if you make a claim on, let's suppose somebody runs a red light and hits your car and liability is clear. You go to your carrier and say, fix my car. Your carrier pays, and then they go after the guy who hit you and say, you're liable for this. That's called a subrogation claim. It's when an insurance company seeks to get reimbursed for dollar damages that they have paid out to their insured. And if you think in terms of a homeowner association setting, owners insurers may want to go against the association saying you didn't take care of the place right. And association carriers may want to go against owners saying you were negligent. And so there's a concept out there in virtually all documents that say that there is a mutual waiver of subrogation rights. Now, that doesn't mean the owner can't go after the association or vice versa. It means the carriers who've paid out can't seek reimbursement in the middle of that context. So watch for the word subrogation, and it should be mutual. So keep an eye out, and it's an important part of the risk management plan. And catastrophic loss, we've touched on the fact that when you get one of those and you're in that article in your CCNRs, you want a good roadmap, something reliable. And if it doesn't make sense to you now, just imagine that kitchen fire, imagine a whole building burning down, whatever that might be. Go to that article, and if it doesn't give you a roadmap, it's not going to help you when there's a real problem. Okay, so let's see. Got a little bit. Okay, next slide. This is an area that I'm actually kind of excited about. Artificial intelligence, and I hope your eyes didn't just roll back. Yeah, deservedly so. Every time you pick up a newspaper or an iPad and looking at articles, you just see artificial intelligence. Well, I can tell you that pretty close to a year ago, we started working with plugging in documents in the Davis-Sterling Act into artificial intelligence and then asking it questions. Now, if you dabble in this, you'll know that you have to have the paid subscription to get long documents in, and sometimes it works better at off-peak hours. But the bottom line is that I can put in a set of CCNRs and test it and say who's responsible for maintenance, repair, and replacement of this feature. If there is a document violation, a parent violation. What's the authority for that violation? Give me the section number. Tell me what the process is for the board to address it. Describe the hearing, the results of the hearing, and what options are there to enforce. Plug that in with a set of documents, and boom, it gets pretty close. That's the good news is it can save you a lot of work on the front end, but that's sizing it up. The difficulty is that they still are these things called hallucinations. And I did that not long ago with the AI that I like using, Claude, because it'll search document specific. And I asked Claude for the specific sections. And boy, Claude gave me the answers that I wanted and lined it all out there, bullet points, headings. Oh, it was a gorgeous presentation. And then I went to check on the citations, and there was one, it didn't exist. It was citation to a section that was not in the document. And I said, well, Claude, I think you made a mistake. That section doesn't exist. And Claude apologized. Truly, sorry. Let me do that again. Came back with another section citation. I looked, that one didn't exist. I said, Claude, that's 2 times you've missed that. Double check and make sure that it's there. I kid you not. Claude said, why don't we try again later? Okay, so we're not quite there. The difficulty when you use AI on your documents is that there may be hallucinations, so you got to double check, and it's hard to see what's not there. When I know the answer and I have it come out of the document, I can fine tune it and get it fairly accurate. But you need to know that on a good day, it's only going to be 70 to 80% accurate, and it may not be obvious where it's not accurate, but it is a start. And things are changing quickly, and you should be aware of it, whether it's Davis Sterling that you're going through and asking questions of, or you've got Gemini or Chat GPT or Claude or one of the other ones. This is up and coming. It's changing really quickly, and the answers are getting better. They've been getting significantly better over the last 6 months, and I expect they continue to. So what the key is, prompts. People often ask too short a question, and load the front end with facts, because it'll absorb all of the facts and the prompts. So you may have 3 or 4 sentences of facts and 2 or 3 areas that you want to get into, and load it all up on the front end. Or if you find yourself starting and the answer isn't thorough enough, do follow-up prompts, follow-up questions. Now tell me about this. Now tell me about that. If you start to play with it, you're going to find that it's a wonderful tool, but it's not going to replace your own independent experience. You may well be having to call in counsel anyway, but at least you'll be kind of launched into where you think that the thing is going to go, and it's there. Well, I've had problems for years because we put so many tools in the documents we draft. They're unique, and people don't know they exist, let alone to look for them. So that's a handicap of the documents, and AI is finally going to give us, I think, accessibility where you don't have to know much of anything, and it'll ferret out the tools in the documents and the sections and the specific details. So anyway, that's we're there on that. Bylaws, I'll try and move through pretty quickly here. Bylaws, I don't spend a whole lot of time talking about them because they're somewhat, I won't say generic. There are lots of customizing that can be done, but they're not all that exciting. What we know is that there are electronic meetings out there, and whether that's a board meeting or a member meeting, electronic voting is now the thing. Reduced quorums, that's a missed opportunity often, that you can reduce the quorum or the number of votes necessary to accomplish certain things. In our documents, we'll have 3, 4, 5 different quorums, depending on how important the subject matter is. A lot of documents still require an annual meeting. Why? The voting is done by mail. I think you should have a meeting, but I think it should be an informational meeting, and it doesn't need to be quorum qualified. If you're required to have one, corporations code and your existing bylaws require that. Well, then you're stuck. You're required to have it, and if you don't, you're in violation of the law, even though there may not be much of a consequence. Why not clean that part up? Approval of meeting minutes, fine with respect to the board, but if you have annual meeting minutes, even informational, what's the procedure in that the board can approve the minutes? You don't have to wait for the next year when everybody's forgotten what happened. Member notice options, that's changing and expanding and getting more detailed all the time. Timelines, yeah, that's so long now. There's so many steps. Acclamation is pretty cumbersome now. One thing we have started doing in the bylaws, the whole subject of voting has become so complicated and prolonged, and they tinker with it constantly. We've decided to go with a minimalist approach to voting provisions in the bylaws, and say, basically, see the policy, and then the board can simply update the policy when the law changes. And there's a lot of flexibility in the policy. We don't want 2 documents that are almost the same as each other, and then one erodes faster than the other. That's just not a good approach to the thing. Okay, so next slide, extending the length of the documents, the life of the documents. There are a couple of things that you can do when you look at them and think, well, how are we going to go about this? Number one is we want the board to have authority to update the documents to conform to changes in the law. And that would be board without member voting. What do you need for that? The way we put it in is that they need confirmation by the attorney that the law preempts some aspect of their documents. And you add together 3 or 4 of those things, then the board does a resolution, sends it out for 28-day review of the members, just the heads up, we're going to do this. And then you can amend the bylaws yourself, for example, or the CCNRs to conform to the law. That will get you more time on your documents. The ability for directors without a vote of the members to update, especially as to certain legal areas. The legislature has dictated to boards, if you haven't gotten around to it, that you have the responsibility to amend to conform your rental provisions to the current statute that came into play a couple of years back. If you have old rental provisions, the legislature said you must update your documents, and the board has the authority to do that without a vote of the members. That's also true. A little bit cumbersome, but the board can remove declarant references if they're completely outdated. Then you get into areas of discrimination. That it's been pretty cold subject for a long while, but there was a time back when there were racial covenants in some of the older documents, and the legislature said, board of directors, you are required to go in and remove those things, and we're authorizing you to do that. So there are some areas where the legislature actually gives the board the authority to make those changes. As a by the way, on the racial, one thing that we did, we took the opportunity to retype these old documents from the late 50s and early 60s, and we retyped the whole things. And even though we couldn't amend other aspects other than eliminating the racial aspect, we put little reference boxes around commenting on how the law has changed, citing to the particular statutes. And there was an owner who actually challenged it and said you can't do that. But in the document, we said the boxes are not part of the covenant, and the trial court, and the Court of Appeal said that was a great idea. Okay, so lastly, watch for the zingers. And the zingers, early on, you want to see what lender approvals are required. Go into the mortgage protection section and see what, if any, approval of lenders you're going to want to either get or work around. Take a look at that. Sometimes some things require city approval, and that can be a bear as well. So take a look at that, put the game plan together. Also deal with your voter apathy. Start thinking about that plan on the front end, how you're going to organize or group things, get people to turn out, the pitches that you're going to make. And I will tell you, a lot of associations, if you still have 75%, you think I can get 75% to show up at a party or do anything. I couldn't even hand out money on a weekend and get 75% to do anything. Consider amending your document first with one issue, and that is reduce the percentage. That's it. Because if you have to go to court and you want to ask the judge to reduce it from 75% to a simple majority, judges like that. It's simple. It's a simple majority. I can make that decision. I'll grant the petition. If instead you go into court and you've got a 35 or 40-page set of CC&Rs, judges hate looking at that because they have no idea whether any of it's any good, and they don't want to put their blessing on it. So think about doing a mini amendment on the percentage. If you think that you can't get the 75%, lower that first, then get into the document. Or if you're voting on the entire document and it fails and you decided there's no way to get the vote out and make it work, then consider going in on just lowering the percentage and then go back to the main documents. All right. Well, that's pretty much the once over. And start now. When you get to the end, or now, start your wish list and think about approval requirements, and you'll be well on your way. And I really appreciate the fact that you've turned out. It's not a subject that excites a lot of people, but as you can tell, I'm still having a good time, and I hope that you found it of interest. All right. I'm not hearing Dave.
Yeah, thank you
There
very
you
much.
go.
We appreciate it, and we're going to pop into our Q&A session. And first of all, the Q&A session is sponsored today by Associa and CID Consortium LLC. Thank you so much to those two wonderful companies for supporting Echo and making this Q&A session possible. Please place your questions in the Q&A feature and use the upvote feature in the Q&A. It's this thumbs up. I think it's in the upper right corner of the Q&A to help you prioritize the questions you'd like to have answered first. We are running a little short of time here, so we'll get to as many as we possibly can. So take a look at your at the questions. Please vote, and then we'll start with the most upvotes. Glenn, for you, the most upvotes icon, you want to go to the top right of the Q&A feature, and that's where you'll find a little caret, a little down arrow, and then
That,
select
yeah, that's
select
not going to help. I'm on an iPad, so I don't have that feature readily
Oh
available.
yeah, well, PC users. I'll use it then, and there's a little upvote feature in the top there. So
Okay.
I have done that, and I will go ahead and start asking questions. Give me 2 seconds to get things organized here, and we'll be ready to go. Make sure you read through those questions, everyone. Thank you so much. I was able to answer a few questions while we were doing this. Okay, so the most upvotes. Well, we have Michelle as our number one. If the CC&Rs are from 1998 and there has been a transition from one developer to another developer, but not a transition of power to the homeowners yet, what can homeowners do to help make sure the transition of power to the homeowners takes place? Can you address
Wow, that's a long time for a project not to be built out or completely annexed. I think that's something where you need to get into your existing documents and figure out. Usually declarant authority uh, dissipates a certain time, for example, from the first sale. Not necessarily 100% go over, but if the declarant is or the developer subdivider is paying assessments and they're getting a vote and they can dominate, then you've got to accommodate them. Your situation sounds pretty unusual, but where there are developer rights or declarant rights and you want to update the documents, it may well be that you take all of those rights that they don't want to yield or give up on, put them in an exhibit that can be dropped later, or cross-reference in your new document, say if there are any declarant rights still left, that they are as stated in the prior CC&Rs at article whatever, which to this extent is incorporated by reference, and then get it out of there so you can have a fresh document when you're going forward. As to the mechanics of getting developer approval, if they've still got that kind of control, I don't know. You're going to have to do some planning session with your specific documents and circumstances.
Okay, good. So let's take Raul Kolunga. Raul Kolunga's his question, and he has 15 people that wanted this answered. What are the triggers that would cause an HOA to consider amending its governing documents?
I can tell you because I often get people saying, "I knew I put it off just a little too long," um, it's usually a lawsuit or a bitter debate on who's responsible for what. And I'll tell you that we talked earlier about the fact that you target maybe 10,000 and know that it could go a fair amount higher. It's not likely to be less. Um, but you go into a fight with attorneys and you're going to drop $10,000 and you're not going to have any forward progress while nasty letters are flowing back and forth, or maybe you're fending off in court. Um, it's usually when something goes wrong. And I will tell you, the king of all things going wrong was an association. I had worked with them on the documents. They were up in Sonoma County, and thank God they're pretty much completely built out back, but they failed to get the documents done, and the board just decided we're not going to keep trying, and they failed, and the neighborhood disappeared in one huge firestorm about 6 months later. And they had documents from the developer that gave them no help at all in rebuilding the neighborhood that had been turned to ash. There wasn't even ash left. Everything carbon was gone, and they failed. That when the first thing that they did once they got back on their feet was, let's update the documents, let's get those in place.
Yeah.
And people hadn't even moved back into their homes when that renewed effort started. But it could also be, you get into the example of a bathroom remodel and moisture into the wall. That was another one where the owner was saying, "Hey, I'm going to sue you if you don't fix this, because that wall is common area and I didn't make that alteration."
Mhm.
And it wasn't in the documents, and they ended up hiring a lawyer, and ultimately the association didn't pay for that work, but they spent thousands of dollars in the legal fight before the whole thing resolved itself. So usually it's after an expense that will trigger it and go, oh, we gotta do these before it happens again. So it's
Okay.
usually an unfortunate circumstance, but
So Raul has another really good question here. And again, 11 votes. So he's popular today. Is it better to modify the governing documents or to rewrite them in the entirety? So
you
recent,
know,
yeah.
uh, for the bylaws start from scratch with a new set of bylaws, and most attorneys will have a set of bylaws that are kept up current in the law, and then you can customize them. Attorneys have their preferences for a lot of things to kind of tweak them. With respect to the CCNRs, there are pros and cons. Well, I mentioned the template approach. Do you use the template where you start with an existing boilerplate and then you customize it extensively, or do you redline? There are pros and cons to both. Um, my personal preference is I like the redlining, and even if it ends up changing substantial portions, I still like that. I think it makes it easier for the board to participate and provide input, and the owners along the way when they can see the progression of the thing. In our instance, the first red line draft that goes into the board's hands is probably about 95%, maybe a little bit more of what they're going to end up with. And so the redlining helps them see that, give us coaching on a handful of things where we have boxes saying which way do you want to handle it, and then we fine tune with some very minor additional generations that go into it. That's my preference, but it's legitimate when somebody says we like it. It's more efficient when we use our standard. I think standard things may get overlooked, or sometimes they don't fit. But it's a legitimate other approach, and I can't tell you one is good or bad.
Yeah,
Both.
and I hate to tell you this, but I think we're running out of time here. But I'm going to take one more simply because I think at least three questions is appropriate. Let's go ahead with Debbie Husnick Young, and she has a question that a couple of people responded to. But what if your HOA really can't afford to pay for updating governing documents, yet they need to be updated? What is your suggestion in that regard?
It's really, you can't afford not to, is my experience, because somewhere along the line it's going to cost you more because you didn't have clarity in your documents. And so, if you're having that kind of difficulty, start stashing, like the reserve study, start stashing a little bit of money each year aside so that you can build that up. Or make the pitch to your owners for a special assessment, and you're going to have to make a pitch that explains to them why this is a good thing and it's going to save them money ultimately. But the age-old argument, well, we can't take care of the place, or we can't do this, or we can't do that because we don't have enough money. Nobody's got enough money. If it's important enough, go to the owners and say, this is what we need to do. Make it palatable enough so they can afford to do it, and make the pitch. It's got to be a coherent pitch as to how important it is.
Okay, so that sounds good. And from a personal perspective, I'm on my HOA board. We're looking at updating our governing documents. We looked at the bill, and we've had some challenges with our reserves lately, and we are continuing to look at what we need to do. So sometimes you just move it down the road a little bit, and you just plan on it. And so we are planning on it. So great conversation, Glenn. I appreciate your participation here today. I don't know if you have time to maybe hang around for a little while longer
Sure.
afterwards, but I'm gonna try to get through our closing thank yous and announcements as quickly as I can, and then we'll take it from there. And so first of all, I'd like to thank everyone of the Echo members here that for coming today and supporting us in our ongoing programs. We appreciate your time and hope that this is of value to you. For those of you who are not Echo members, and we know that usually around 20 to 30% of the people that come to our events are not ECHO members, we ask that you please consider becoming a member and supporting HOA boards throughout the country. To join, simply go to www.echo-ca.org and click on the membership tab, or just send us an email and we will talk with you about it and hopefully bring you on board. For those Echo members, we want to say thank you again for supporting us, and please invite your friends, board members, and especially management firms and vendors to come and visit us at an Echo meeting, online or in person. Love to see you, or to use one of our on-demand programs. So we offer a lot to everyone. So please see if we can get someone to know a little bit more about Echo and join Echo. A simple invitation is all that it takes sometimes. So we encourage you to do that. If you would like to become more involved with Echo, please consider joining our volunteer corps. We just started this a few months ago, and we have a good little group that's growing that helps us with a number of different things, from editing articles, writing articles, to helping us with events and putting programs together, to doing some administrative duties as well, looking for venues and database entry and that kind of thing. We're a small organization. There's only what, 4.5 of us, so any help is appreciated, and we would certainly love to have you join the team. Just simply send an email to dezappone@echo-ca.org, and I'll take a look at it and give you a call. Now, for those other announcements, the Echo HOA University has an educational program focused on HOA board preparedness. The core curriculum of 10 courses is designed for a high-quality training experience and is available for HOA board members, interested homeowners, and professionals. Your participation in this program will earn you a certificate of HOA board member preparedness. The courses are offered live, online, and most courses are recorded and available on demand. If you or someone you know wants to enroll in the program, please send an email to Connor and he'll set you up. His email address is on the screen. We are now is on the screen. I highly recommend this. It's a good program, and it's a way to fight community apathy. If you have someone who has some inkling of interest and is just not quite ready, this is a good program for them to go through so that they feel comfortable and confident in joining the board. We are now heading into our second round of resource panels for this year, the second quarter. Here are the events that are coming up in May. The South Bay Resource Panel in San Jose will be Tuesday, May 6th. From 11:30 to 1:30, and it's going to be on finding the money, funding major projects for homeowners. Then we have another meeting in San Pablo Bay Resource Panel. That's in Benicia on Wednesday, May 7th. Strategies for building effective relationships between the homeowner association and its managing agent. Central Coast Resource Panel is going to be held Thursday, May 8th, and we will be discussing landscaping and fire preparedness, FireWise, Fire Safe, Future Ready. Yeah, that's a great program. We look forward to seeing everyone. It'll be in Soquel at the Santa Cruz Realtors Association building. We also have 3 larger in-person events planned for this year with multiple speakers and 20 or so exhibitors. Registrations for the first event on June 7th will be available after today's webinar. If you want to take advantage of the early rate, which is early bird is, I believe, free. So if you sign up quickly, you can be free. You can head to our website and get in early. We have invited Senator Cortese from San Jose and the majority whip of the California Senate to participate in the meeting. He's tentatively accepted, but he's invited because he has to check his schedule when he gets really close. He spoke last year, did a great job. He is on the housing committee as well. So a wonderful person and good opportunity to get to know him and ask your questions. The Northern California Educational Seminar is June 7th. The Southern California in Laguna Hills seminar is October 10th. And the Legislative Update and NorCal seminar is on November 15th. That'll be in Walnut Creek at Rossmore. So we hope to see you all at one of these larger events. They run generally from 10 to 2:30 on a Saturday. So there's a good opportunity to see you there. And I want to say thanks to Glenn for being here today and being our presenter. We appreciate the time you've taken to help board members and homeowners know a little bit more about governing documents and the importance of of building those documents correctly and amending and restating them. ECHO appreciates everyone's investment in education to foster a better quality of life in HOA communities.